Part 1: The Inheritance. Section 1: The Letter from Zurich. London, winter 2011. The rain had a way of making the city look older, the kind of grey that bled through stone and memory alike. Ethan Caldwell sat at his kitchen table, the Morning Post spread before him, half-read. He hadn't slept much in weeks. The kettle hissed in the background, but he didn't move to pour. His eyes were fixed on a single envelope among the pile, stamped with a Swiss address, and a law firm's insignia. Müller and Weiss. Zurich. The name alone made his chest tighten. He broke the seal with shaking fingers. Inside, a letter typed in immaculate German, with an English translation beneath. We regret to inform you of the death of Mr. Robert Caldwell, who passed away on the 14th of December, 2010, following a climbing accident near the Weisshorn region of the Swiss Alps. As his next of kin, you have been listed as the sole inheritor of his remaining property in Canton Valley. Ethan read the paragraph twice before his mind began to process the words. Climbing accident. His father had always climbed, even when he was younger, before the divorce, but that was decades ago. Robert Caldwell hadn't been a father in any meaningful sense since Ethan was 13. He had left London without a backward glance, vanishing into the mountains and sending only the occasional postcard, each more cryptic than the last. Now he was gone for good. The letter continued. Among the assets is a cabin located near Zermatt, registered under your father's name since 1993. Coordinates attached. We request your presence for signature and property assessment. Ethan set the paper down and stared out the rain-blurred window. Across the narrow street, the world carried on, a woman walking her dog, buses hissing over puddles, oblivious to the fact that his world had just tilted again. The cabin. He hadn't known about any cabin. His mother certainly hadn't mentioned one. When he called her later that day, she answered on the third ring. Ethan. You sound strange. What is it? He hesitated. It's Dad. A silence stretched. What about him? He's dead, Mum. There was an accident. In Switzerland. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, almost too steady. I see. That's all you have to say. Helen Caldwell had the tone of a woman who had exhausted her grief years ago. He chose that life, Ethan. He chose to die on a mountain instead of being a father. You don't need to go digging through what's left of him. He owned a cabin near Zermatt. The lawyers said I have to sign papers in person. You can sign them here. Send an email. Let it go. He rubbed his eyes. I just want to see it. To understand what he was doing out there all these years. Helen's sigh was weary, like someone bracing for a storm. Your father was obsessed with things no one could prove. When he left, he wasn't the man I married anymore. Promise me you'll be careful. I'll just go, settle everything, and come back. A few days, that's all. Ethan, her voice softened, just slightly. Don't stay after dark. The flight to Geneva was uneventful, but the train ride into the Alps felt like descending into another world. By the time Ethan reached Zermatt, the sun had already dipped behind the peaks, leaving the town in an early twilight. Snow fell in soft sheets, burying the roofs, muting the world. The air smelled of pine and cold metal. At the station, a short man in a wool coat waited with a placard that read Mr. Caldwell. His name was Herr Dieter Weiss, one of the lawyers from the Zurich firm. Your father was a private man, Weiss said as they shook hands. Few here even knew he existed. Ethan followed him through the narrow streets to a small office overlooking the frozen river. Inside, a single lamp cast long shadows across a desk covered in papers. Your father left minimal assets, Weiss explained. But he did own a property outside the town. Remote. No official address, only coordinates. Here. He handed over a folded map, the paper worn soft from years of use. You'll find it about 10 kilometers north of Zermatt, near the lower ridge of the Rothwald forest. Ethan studied the map. Handwritten notes covered its edges, small, typed script that looked unmistakably like his father's. Tracks follow light. Avoid the eastern slope. He moves when the moon is high. What's this? Ethan asked. Weiss adjusted his glasses. We assumed field notes from his climbing days. Your father had a reputation among locals. Some called him a scientist, others, a ghost story. A ghost story. The lawyer smiled faintly, as if embarrassed. They said he searched for something. A man who never aged. Der Wanderer im Moonlight. The Moonlight Traveler. Old superstition. You'll hear it in the taverns if you ask. Ethan tucked the map into his coat. And you believe that? I believe grief drives men to strange places, Weiss said. And your father had been searching since 1985. Ethan frowned. Since before he left us. Weiss nodded once. He was part of something then. A research group, I think. It ended badly. By the time Ethan left the office, the snow had thickened into a storm. He found a small inn near the edge of town and checked in, the old woman at the counter greeting him with polite suspicion. His room smelled faintly of wood smoke and lavender, the window facing the mountain range. He unpacked slowly, laying the folded map across the desk, tracing the inked coordinates with his finger. The path wound through dense forest, past a river, then up into higher ground. The note beside it read simply, "The cabin is safest when the light dies." That night, Ethan dreamed of his father standing on a snowy ridge, staring at something just out of sight. A pale figure across the valley, bathed in moonlight. When Ethan called to him, Robert turned, and half his face was gone. Morning came white and silent. Ethan set out before dawn, his backpack heavy with gear, flashlight, flare gun, rope, compass. The clerk at the inn tried to dissuade him. "The trails aren't safe this time of year," she said, wringing her hands. "Even the locals stay below the tree line when the wind rises." "I'll be fine," Ethan assured her. "It's just a short hike." She gave him a look that said she'd heard that before. "If you hear the bells, come back." "Bells?" "Church bells from Zermatt," she said quickly. "They carry far in bad weather." But when Ethan stepped outside, he could have sworn the sound she meant wasn't man-made at all, faint, metallic, echoing through the snow like something breathing. The first hours of the climb were pure beauty. The Alps stretched endlessly, a kingdom of white peaks and shadows. Pines bowed under snowdrifts, the air crisp and thin. Every sound, even his own breathing, felt magnified. Halfway up the trail, Ethan found the first marker from the map, a stone cairn buried under frost, a rusted lantern frozen to its base. Someone, likely Robert, had carved a name into the rock. Victor Lang. 1985. Ethan brushed away the snow, his breath clouding. The name meant nothing to him yet, but something about it tugged at the edge of memory. A note from the lawyer's story. Der Wanderer im Moonlight. He stood for a moment, letting the silence close around him. The forest seemed to listen. Somewhere far above, thunder cracked, not from the sky, but from shifting ice. By late afternoon, the trail narrowed into a winding pass that cut between two cliffs. The wind howled through it, carrying flecks of ice sharp enough to sting his face. He pressed onward, boots crunching through snow that reached his knees. The cabin appeared just before dusk, a dark shape half buried beneath a slope of snow and pine. Smoke no longer rose from its chimney. The roof sagged under frost, and the porch was littered with frozen leaves. It looked less like a home than a relic. Ethan stood at the edge of the clearing, heart pounding. He had imagined this moment for years, and yet now that it was real, it felt wrong. There was no peace here. Only stillness, deep, heavy, expectant. He took a step forward, the snow creaking beneath his boots. Somewhere behind him, a tree cracked under the weight of ice. The sound echoed through the valley like a gunshot. And for a moment, Ethan thought he saw something move in the tree line, a tall shape, pale against the dark pines, watching. Section 2, the cabin in the snow. The key was still in the lock. It turned stiffly, frozen in place by years of disuse, but with enough force the door creaked open. A gust of stale, cold air poured out, heavy with dust, pine, and something faintly metallic, like dried blood. Ethan stepped inside. The light from his headlamp swept across the cabin's interior, one large room, half kitchen and half workshop. Dust motes hung in the air like suspended ash. A stone fireplace crouched in one corner, blackened but cold. Tools lay scattered on the table, chisels, field knives, rolls of old maps, all covered in frost. On the far wall hung a row of photographs, yellowed at the edges, held in place with rusted pins. The cabin wasn't abandoned. It was paused, as if its owner had stepped out only for a moment and never returned. Ethan shut the door behind him, setting his pack down with a soft thud. "Dad," he murmured to the empty room. The silence seemed to shift in response. He tried the light switch, nothing. The power was long dead. He unpacked a portable lantern, its glow casting long, trembling shadows. Every corner of the cabin looked like it carried a memory. A half-read book on the desk, a mug still bearing the ghost of coffee rings, a coat draped over the back of a chair. And then there were the scratches. They covered the inner walls, faint at first, then deeper toward the door, thin parallel lines, as though someone had clawed the wood in panic. Ethan crouched to examine them. The grooves were too narrow for an axe, too shallow for a bear. They looked almost deliberate. He turned toward the desk, where his father's old journal lay open. The last entry dated December 10, 2010, 4 days before the accident. He's close now. Tracks in the upper valley, near the frozen ridge. Moved again, during full moon. Same pattern. He avoids light, even firelight. I'll try once more tonight. If I don't return, the key to the cellar is behind the stove. Ethan's breath fogged the page. "The cellar," he whispered. He glanced toward the small cast-iron stove near the wall. Behind it, a loose floorboard jutted slightly upward. With effort, he pried it free, revealing a small compartment, and inside, an old iron key wrapped in cloth. The key was cold enough to sting his skin. For a moment, he simply stared at it, debating whether to keep searching or wait until morning. But the thought of sleep was impossible. The cabin's silence wasn't peaceful, it was watching him. He moved deeper inside, following the faint smell of oil and metal until he found a narrow trapdoor half hidden beneath a rug. The hinges groaned as he lifted it. A stairway descended into darkness. He flicked on his flashlight. The beam revealed a cramped space below, stone walls lined with shelves, jars filled with murky liquid, and dozens of photographs hanging from string with metal clips. He climbed down carefully, the wooden steps groaning under his weight. Every photograph showed the same man. Tall. Silver-haired. Gaunt as a shadow. In some images, he stood on a ridge beneath the moonlight, face turned away. In others, his eyes glowed faintly in the camera flash, the eerie reflection of an animal. Scrawled beneath one image in Robert's handwriting was a single word. Victor. Ethan ran a hand over the photos. They spanned decades, from the mid-1980s to only months before his father's death. In the later ones, Victor looked less human. His posture hunched, skin grey in the film grain, eyes hollow. Among the papers on the workbench, Ethan found maps of the Alps covered in notes. Red circles marked locations labeled observation points and last sighting. In the margin, his father had written, Don't let him see the light. He moves with the moon. The body survives, but not the mind. Ethan frowned. His father had clearly been tracking someone, but the details read less like field research, and more like paranoia. Another page bore a sketch of a human figure, surrounded by diagrams of lunar phases and temperature charts. Next to it, a line of text. VL, Experiment Exposure, January 12, 1985. After that night, he wasn't Victor anymore. The initials struck him like ice. Victor Lang. The name carved into the stone cairn on the trail. Ethan's pulse quickened. He flipped through more pages, uncovering journal fragments. The serum failed. The others are dead. Only Victor remains, changed. The organization disbanded. They called it a curse. I call it proof. He comes to the valley every winter. Always under the full moon. Always alone. Ethan leaned against the wall, head spinning. His father had been hunting this man, or perhaps running from him. But if Victor Lang was still alive, that would make him, what, exactly? Nearly 70 years old. Impossible. He turned toward a small crate beneath the desk. Inside, beneath a folded top, lay a hunting rifle and a box of ammunition. A note was taped to the lid. For when he finds you. Ethan stared at the words for a long moment, then shut the crate. Jesus, Dad. He climbed back upstairs, locking the trapdoor behind him. The lantern flickered, its light shrinking against the dark windows. Outside, the storm had grown violent. Snow lashed the glass, and the wind howled through the chimney like a living thing. He built a fire from what little would remained, feeding it until the warmth began to chase away the chill. The flames painted the walls in restless orange shapes. For the first time, he noticed movement among the photographs above the mantel, not real movement, but the illusion of it, as if the eyes of the silver-haired man shifted when the firelight danced. Ethan laughed under his breath, more out of nerves than humor. Losing it already. He poured himself a glass of melted snow from the kettle and sat by the fire. For a while, the only sounds were the crackle of burning wood and the storm outside. The exhaustion of travel began to seep into him. That was when he heard it. A single, sharp thud against the wall. Then another. Not the wind. Something heavier. He rose, listening. The sound came again, a dull, rhythmic scrape, as though someone were dragging their hand along the outer wall of the cabin. His heart hammered in his throat. He grabbed the lantern and stepped to the window. Outside, the night was pure white, a chaos of wind and snow. The trees swayed violently, but through the flurries he could make out a faint indentation in the snow near the tree line. Footprints. Bare, human, and fresh. Ethan backed away, breath quickening. No, 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 he turned off the lantern, plunging the room into shadow except for the fire's glow. The noise stopped instantly, leaving only the storm. Minutes passed. Then something else, faint, distant, drifted through the wind. A sound like humming. A man's voice, low and broken, singing a few words in a language Ethan didn't recognize. He froze. It wasn't inside his head. It was outside, moving slowly around the cabin. Who's there? Ethan called, voice cracking. No answer. He tightened his grip on the rifle, feeling the rough grain of the wood beneath his fingers. The singing faded into the distance, swallowed by the storm. But the silence that followed felt worse, expectant, waiting. He stood there for nearly an hour, eyes fixed on the window, until the fire began to die. Only when the cold finally forced him to move did he dare glance outside again. The footprints were gone. No, not gone. Covered. The wind had filled them with snow, erasing any proof that they'd ever been there. Ethan sank into the chair by the fire, trembling. He tried to tell himself it was imagination, that the isolation and exhaustion were making him hear things. But in the corner of the room, beneath the frostbitten window, something new caught his eye. A mark, drawn crudely on the inside of the glass, traced with what looked like ash or blood, a symbol of interlocking circles, and beneath it, 3 words scrawled in a shaking hand. He walks again. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He sat by the fire until dawn, rifle across his lap, the symbol staring back at him from the frost. When the first light crept over the mountains, he rose stiffly, every muscle aching. The storm had passed, but the air outside was unnaturally still, no birds, no wind, only the deep silence of the Alps. He stepped out onto the porch. The snow glittered under the pale morning sun, smooth and untouched. No footprints. No sign of anyone. And yet, when he turned toward the trees, he noticed something half buried beneath the lowest branch, a strip of dark cloth caught on the bark. He pulled it free. It was a sleeve. Wool, torn at the edge. And beneath the frost, stitched in faded thread, a name barely legible. Section 3, The Moonlight on the Ridge. The morning after the storm, the world had been remade. The air was crystalline, the sky a sheet of pale blue stretched tight above the peaks. The forest around the cabin lay buried in white silence, not the soft quiet of peace, but the kind that comes after something has already happened. Ethan stood on the porch, turning the torn sleeve over in his gloved hands. The stitched letters V, Lang were faint, almost erased by frost. He tried to imagine his father discovering this, how Robert might have felt holding the same piece of fabric. Had he seen Victor alive? Had he watched him vanish into the trees? The thought settled into Ethan's stomach like lead. He went back inside and sat at the desk. The fire had burned out, the cabin was cold again. The symbol on the window still glared at him from the frost, those interlocking circles, drawn with something dark and sticky. He avoided looking at it too long. Instead, he pulled his father's notebook closer, flipping through pages written in the same urgent, narrow script. He walks only where the moon touches the ground. I've seen him vanish when the clouds pass. He's not a man anymore. Do not use light. It draws him. If he calls your name, don't answer. Ethan exhaled through his teeth. You really lost it, didn't you, Dad? Yet even as he said it, he wasn't sure if he meant disbelief or fear. He packed a small satchel with the journal, the map, and his father's old camera, deciding to follow the trail behind the cabin. He couldn't explain why, maybe curiosity, maybe the desperate need to prove to himself that there was a rational explanation for all of this. He told himself it would just be a short walk. The forest felt older than the world itself. The pines rose like pillars, their branches heavy with ice. The path wound upward through snowdrifts and fallen logs, the air growing thinner with every step. Somewhere far below, he could hear the faint rush of a river beneath the frozen crust. After half an hour, he reached a small clearing where the sunlight cut through the treetops. There, half buried under snow, lay an old metal tripod, the kind used for survey equipment. Next to it, a broken camera, the film compartment cracked open. He brushed away the frost. The brand was decades old, one he remembered from childhood photos. His father's handwriting was scratched onto the side in marker. Lang, Phase 3. 2:15 a.m. Ethan crouched, heart quickening. He picked up the camera carefully. The film roll inside had fused from moisture, but the idea that Robert had been recording something here made the back of his neck prickle. He turned slowly in a circle, scanning the tree line. There, to the east, faint depressions in the snow, barely visible, leading deeper into the woods. Not footprints, exactly. More like someone had dragged something heavy through the drifts. Against every instinct, he followed. The trail twisted for nearly a kilometer, before ending at a ridge overlooking the valley. From here, Ethan could see the frozen expanse of the lower forest, endless white, dotted with the black tips of trees. But what drew his eye wasn't the view, it was the stone circle half buried in the snow at the ridge's edge. 9 stones, each taller than a man, arranged in a near-perfect ring. Their surfaces were carved with the same interlocking circle symbol from the cabin window. Ethan stepped closer. The air inside the ring felt heavier, colder, as if sound itself refused to exist there. He ran a gloved hand across one of the stones. The grooves were deep, smoothed by time. And beneath his touch, he felt warmth. He jerked his hand back. His breath misted in front of him, but the stone pulsed faintly, once, twice, as if something beneath it was beating. Ethan stumbled backward, heart racing. The snow at the center of the circle looked disturbed, shallow as if recently melted. And there, in the middle, lay a small wooden cross carved crudely from alpine pine. Someone had left it as a marker. The name burned into it with a knife point. Robert Caldwell. Ethan froze. No. He knelt beside the cross. The snow beneath it was dark, not with soil, but with something that looked like ash. His father hadn't died on a cliffside, as the lawyers claimed. He had died here. The wind shifted suddenly, cold and sharp. Somewhere down the ridge came a sound, faint at first, then distinct. A single bell, metallic and hollow, echoing once across the valley. Then silence. Ethan turned toward the trees. "Hello," he called. His voice came out too loud in the still air. No answer. But something was moving between the trunks, a flicker of pale motion, there and gone again. He lifted his camera, zooming the lens toward it. For a moment, the world froze. A figure stood about 50 meters away, tall and gaunt, wrapped in torn clothes. Its skin was gray-white, its hair long and silver, glinting faintly under the thin sunlight. It wasn't walking, it was sliding, as if its feet barely touched the ground. Ethan lowered the camera, every nerve in his body screaming. The figure tilted its head. Even from that distance, he could see its eyes, twin reflections of the sky, empty and shining. Ethan stumbled back, slipping in the snow. The figure took a step forward, impossibly slow, its body swaying as though pulled by unseen strings. Then the clouds passed across the sun, and it vanished. Just gone. The air snapped back into motion, the wind picked up, and the forest seemed to breathe again. Ethan ran. He didn't stop until the cabin appeared through the trees. He burst through the door, slamming it shut, heart hammering in his chest. He leaned against the wood, listening for pursuit, but there was only his own ragged breathing. "Get a grip," he muttered. "Altitude. Fatigue. You imagined it." But even as he said it, the snow on his boots was melting onto the floorboards, leaving a trail of dark water. And when he looked down, mixed with the melt was something else, faint streaks of grey ash, like the residue from a fire long dead. He grabbed the camera from his bag and wound it carefully. The last frame he'd taken, the figure at the ridge, sat inside. Proof. Or maybe madness. He lit another fire, trying to shake the cold that had seeped into his bones. The shadows from the flames crawled up the walls, painting strange shapes across the claw marks. The smell of smoke filled the air, comforting, grounding. Then came the knock. Soft at first. 3 times. He froze. It wasn't the wind this time. The sound was deliberate, knuckles on wood, slow, patient. He reached for the rifle. Another knock. Then a voice. Low. Rough. Like the drag of stones across ice. "Robert, open the door." Ethan's breath caught. The voice wasn't his father's. It was deeper, slower, but it knew the name. "Who's there?" he shouted. Silence. Then again, softer. "Robert, please." The sound came from just outside, at the edge of the porch. He crept to the window, careful not to let the firelight reveal him. Through the frosted glass, he could see only a blur of grey and movement. A figure stood in the snow, tall, motionless. Its shoulders hunched, its face hidden in shadow. But when the moonlight broke through the clouds, it caught the outline of a man, pale hair, bare hands, and no coat despite the cold. Ethan's pulse roared in his ears. He raised the rifle. The man tilted his head toward the window, as if sensing the motion. For a moment, their eyes met, or would have, if the thing outside still had eyes. Instead, there were two pale hollows that reflected the firelight back at him. It smiled. Not the way people smile, but the way something remembers how to. Ethan fired. The window shattered, the recoil slamming into his shoulder. The shot exploded into the night, echoing across the valley. The figure staggered back, and then dissolved into the storm, leaving nothing but a faint wail that wasn't quite human. Ethan dropped the rifle and stumbled backward, gasping. When the echo finally died, the cabin fell silent again, too silent. Snow drifted in through the broken glass, hissing against the fire. He forced himself to look. The ground outside was marked, a trail of footprints leading away into the forest. Human-shaped. There. But one thing was wrong. Each print was filled not with snow, but with a black, oily liquid that steamed faintly in the cold. Ethan sank to his knees. The air felt thinner now, the world tilting slightly with every breath. Somewhere deep beneath the floorboards, a faint sound pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, a slow, steady thump, like something awakening. He reached for his father's journal again, flipping to the last page. There, in smeared ink, was one final line. If he knocks, don't answer. He remembers who you are. The fire flickered once, then died. Outside, the moon slid out from behind the clouds, lighting the valley in silver. And just for an instant, Ethan saw him again, standing at the edge of the trees, still watching, as if the night itself had taken shape. The Moonlight Traveler. Part 2: The Cabin in the Snow. Section 1: The Hidden Room. Morning came grey and brittle, the light thin as smoke. Ethan woke in the chair by the fireplace, rifle still across his knees, breath misting in the frozen air. The fire had long since died, leaving only cold ash and the faint smell of gunpowder. The shattered window glittered with frost. He could still hear the echo of the knock in his dreams. For a while he sat motionless, listening to the cabin breathe, old wood shifting, wind sighing through the cracks. Nothing else. No voice calling Robert's name. No footsteps outside. He rose stiffly, bones protesting, and set about sealing the window with a spare plank from the porch. His hands trembled, half from cold, half from the memory of what he'd seen, the face, the hollow eyes, the impossible smile. Every rational part of him screamed hallucination, but the trail of black residue on the snow was real. So was the mark still etched on the window frame, where something had touched it. When the gap was covered, Ethan brewed instant coffee over the stove flame and unfolded Robert's notebook on the table. The ink had bled in places, but one page caught his eye, a coded grid of letters and numbers beside a hand-drawn symbol identical to the one carved on the stones outside. He recognized fragments of coordinates, latitudes near Zermatt, but the rest looked like cipher text. He ran his fingers over the lines, tracing the faint impressions where his father's pen had pressed too hard. In the margin, almost invisible, a line in English. When the moon sets, the door opens. The door, Ethan murmured. His gaze drifted toward the floorboards. The trapdoor to the cellar was still locked. He'd sealed it the night before after finding the photographs, but his father's final note, the one about the key behind the stove, suddenly seemed incomplete. What if there was another door below? He gathered his gear, lantern, notebook, camera, and descended again. The cellar smelled of oil, dust, and something older, iron and damp stone. The air was warmer than it should have been. He switched on the lantern and swept its beam across the walls. The photographs still hung in neat rows, the faces of Victor Lang frozen mid-motion. But now Ethan noticed new details. Thin wires running behind the pictures, connecting to a battery pack, and a crude array of sensors along the far wall. His father had built some kind of monitoring system down here, the equipment decades old but meticulously arranged. Beside it sat a metal cabinet secured with a heavy padlock. Ethan hesitated only a moment before prying it open with a chisel. Inside were notebooks, half a dozen, bound in cracked leather, each labeled Project Lumen, 1985 to 1993. He opened the first. The pages were filled with chemical formulas, measurements, and sketches of human nervous systems overlaid with lunar cycles. Paragraphs alternated between English and German. Objective: to isolate photoreactive proteins capable of altering metabolic decay. Result: subject VL exhibits prolonged tissue preservation. Neurological degradation severe. Exposure to natural moonlight produces erratic behavioral spikes. Ethan's mouth went dry. Subject VL, Victor Lang. He turned another page. There was a photograph taped inside, two men in lab coats standing before a mountain observatory. One was Robert, younger, smiling proudly. The other was Victor, broad-shouldered, with sharp eyes and a cigarette between his fingers. On the back of the photo, scrawled in Robert's hand. He volunteered. I should have stopped him. Ethan set the photo down, stomach twisting. So the experiment Weiss had mentioned wasn't rumor. His father and Victor had been part of something real, something that tried to tamper with life itself. A faint vibration interrupted his thoughts, a low hum, almost electrical. He turned. The sound came from the far wall, behind the shelves. He moved the lantern closer. There, partly concealed behind a hanging top, was a second door, metal, bolted, its surface etched with the same circle symbol. The bolts were old but loose, as if they had been opened recently. Ethan hesitated. Every instinct told him to leave it alone. But curiosity, that same curse that had brought him here, pushed him forward. He unlatched the bolts and pulled. The door groaned open, exhaling a gust of air so cold it burned his lungs. Beyond lay a narrow tunnel carved directly into the rock. The walls glistened with frost, moisture dripped steadily into shallow pools. The passage sloped downward, disappearing into darkness. He raised the lantern and stepped inside. The tunnel extended farther than he expected, 15, 20 meters, before widening into a circular chamber. Here the rock had been reinforced with wooden beams, and in the center stood a structure that looked disturbingly like an examination table. Chains hung from the ceiling. Rusted instruments lay on a side tray, scalpels, syringes, shattered glass vials. A single bulb dangled overhead, connected by wire to a generator that hadn't run in years. Ethan's heartbeat thudded in his ears. The table's surface was stained dark, though whether by rust or something else he didn't want to know. He circled slowly, lantern held high. On the wall opposite the table, scrawled in charcoal, were dozens of phrases, some in English, some in German, laid over each other like graffiti. He was my friend. Light burns the vessel. He waits for me to finish the song. The Alps remember. Beneath them, a single newer line stood out, written in dried brown streaks. If I fail, he will come for you instead. Ethan staggered back, bile rising in his throat. The handwriting was unmistakable, his father's. A faint metallic clink echoed behind him. He froze. Hello. Nothing. He turned slowly, sweeping the lantern beam across the chamber. One of the chains was swaying gently, though he hadn't touched it. Another sound followed, a wet drip, rhythmic, falling from somewhere above. He raised the light. A single droplet slid from the ceiling and landed on his cheek. It was warm. He looked up. Something hung between the beams, something that might once have been human. The skin stretched thin over bone, hair matted with ice, eyes sunk deep into hollow sockets that caught the lantern's glow. The jaw hung open in a silent scream. Ethan stumbled backward, the lantern shaking violently. The corpse swayed with the motion, one chain still hooked through its ribcage. For an instant, he thought he saw the faint shimmer of movement across its face, muscles twitching under frozen skin, but then the light flickered, and it was still. He turned and fled. He burst back into the cellar, slamming the metal door shut and throwing the bolt. His hands shook so badly he dropped the lantern, shattering the glass. Darkness swallowed the room except for the weak glow of daylight filtering through the trapdoor above. He climbed up, gasping, every step echoing too loud. When he reached the main floor, he collapsed against the wall, chest heaving. His pulse refused to slow. The air in the cabin felt heavier now, pressing against him. He wanted to run, pack his things, leave, forget all of it. But something compelled him to look back at the desk. The notebooks from Project Lumen lay open, pages fluttering in the draft from the window boards. On the final page, a photograph had been tucked between the sheets, one he hadn't noticed before. It showed the same stone circle he'd seen on the ridge, but this time, at night. Standing in the center was his father, holding a lantern. And opposite him, illuminated by moonlight, was Victor Lang, barefoot, shirtless, his skin gray and taut, his mouth half open in a snarl. Below, a caption in Robert's hand. "He remembers me." Ethan stared until the words blurred. Then, faintly, from somewhere deep beneath the floor, came a new sound, slow, scraping, deliberate. Not the wind. Not the shifting wood. Something was moving in the tunnel. He grabbed the rifle and backed toward the door, every nerve alight. The noise stopped. Silence swelled, thick as snow. Then, a single knock. From underneath. 3 times. Slow. Patient. Ethan's breath hitched. He aimed the rifle at the floorboards, as if that could help. Nothing followed. Only the steady drip of meltwater from the roof and the low moan of the wind outside. But when he dared glance toward the window, he saw it again, drawn fresh in condensation on the glass, the symbol of interlocking circles. And beneath it, in handwriting too large to be his father's. "Hello, Ethan." Section 2, The Signal in the Storm. By afternoon, the storm returned, harder than before. The light outside turned blue-gray, the kind of color that erases distance, making the mountains and sky dissolve into one another. Snow came sideways, wind battering the cabin with a relentless hiss. Ethan spent the day in motion, anything to avoid thinking about the knock from beneath the floor. He boarded the last window, restacked firewood, forced his mind to mechanical tasks. The less time he sat still, the less he heard the sounds the wind might have been hiding. By evening, he sat again at his father's desk, the lantern's circle of light his only island in the gloom. The radio on the shelf, a military shortwave receiver covered in dust, had caught his attention. Its dials were still labeled in German, its wires neatly soldered. Robert's notes beside it read, "Frequency 118.7, only transmits under moonlight." Ethan almost laughed. The claim was absurd, a trace of obsession too familiar now. Still, the silence of the cabin pressed in so tightly that even static would be a comfort. He connected the receiver to a small battery pack, and flipped the switch. A burst of white noise filled the room. He adjusted the dial, static shifting through tones like breathing. Nothing intelligible, just wind, electrical hum, occasional pulses. He tuned lower, then higher, trying to match the numbers in his father's notes. At 118.7, the static vanished. A low hum replaced it, deep and steady. Then a faint crackle. Then, a voice. "Bert, you there? Can you hear?" Ethan's hands froze on the dial. What the hell? He leaned closer. The voice was distant, warbling through interference, distorted by time or distance. But it spoke English. Male. Rough. Older. Robert, it's me. Ethan's mouth went dry. Victor. The signal broke, replaced by bursts of static, then returned. The light, don't use the light. He follows the warmth now. The tone was strained, like a whisper dragged across gravel. Then silence again. Ethan sat motionless for a long time. His pulse thundered. He follows the warmth now. What did that mean? Some delusion recorded by his father, perhaps. But the voice hadn't sounded recorded. It had sounded live. He checked the window. Night had fallen without his noticing. The snowstorm churned like smoke beyond the glass, and the moon, full and enormous, shone dimly through it, pale as bone. The hum on the radio returned, louder. A sharp crack, like a MIC bump. Then, faintly. Ethan. He knocked the chair over as he stood. His breath came in visible clouds. The voice said his name. Ethan, you shouldn't have come. The transmission cut off completely. The dial spun uselessly in static. Ethan turned the radio off and yanked the battery out. For several seconds he just stood there, hands gripping the desk, heart pounding so hard it blurred his vision. It's interference, he muttered. Echo from another channel. That's all. But the thought didn't hold. The cabin seemed to listen to him, the walls flexing faintly in the wind. He shut the notebook and tried to focus on the cipher again, the coded page with numbers and letters. If he could make sense of it, maybe he could understand what his father had meant by the door. He copied the sequence onto a fresh page and began marking patterns. The numbers repeated in cycles of 7. Every seventh entry aligned with a letter in the phrase lumen. A substitution cipher, maybe. He worked slowly, methodically, until the first legible words began to form. He is drawn to the reflection of his own light. Do not face him when the moon is full. He remembers faces. Each new line felt like a blade turning in his chest. This wasn't the rambling of a madman, it was methodical, scientific in tone, as if Robert had been trying to write instructions. He found a folded sheet between the journal pages. A hand-drawn diagram of the cabin and its foundations. At the bottom, marked in red ink, lower chamber, sealed. The words triggered memory. The tunnel. The corpse. He swallowed. He couldn't stop imagining it, the face in the lantern light, the frozen expression, the faint twitch. Was it really dead? He tried to push the thought away. It has to be a trick of the light. He spent another hour decoding, losing track of time. The storm outside masked all sound, the world beyond the cabin ceased to exist. When he finally leaned back, rubbing his eyes, it was past midnight. The fire had dimmed to a faint orange glow. He rose to stoke it. Then he paused. The ashes weren't glowing red, they were pulsing. A slow rhythm, like a heartbeat, emanated from beneath the coals. He stared, paralyzed. The heat against his face intensified, though he hadn't added wood. A noise came next, soft, dragging, from beneath the floor. A shuffle. Then the faint creak of the trapdoor hinges. Ethan grabbed the rifle and turned toward it. No, he whispered. No, you're not real. The sound stopped. He took a step closer. The lantern on the desk flickered once, then went out. Darkness swallowed the room. He fumbled for his flashlight, its beam shaking wildly across the walls. Dust motes swirled. The claw marks on the door seemed deeper now, darker. He aimed the light at the trapdoor. It was slightly ajar. Something had opened it from below. Ethan raised the rifle, finger tight on the trigger. If anyone's there, stay back. A low hiss answered him, barely audible, like air escaping between teeth. He froze. Slowly, A hand gripped the edge of the hatch, pale, thin, streaked with black residue. The nails were cracked, claw-like. Then a second hand joined it. Ethan fired. The blast lit the room in a white flash. The recoil knocked him backward. Wood splintered, echo thundering through the cabin. When the smoke cleared, the hatch lay half open, the space below filled with drifting dust. Nothing moved. He inched forward, breath trembling, and kicked the hatch shut, throwing the latch into place. Then he dragged the table over it and sank against the wall. The storm howled outside, shaking the cabin to its bones. He could almost believe it was over, until the faintest sound reached him again, this time from the radio. Static. Then, beneath it, the whisper of a voice he could barely hear. "You shouldn't have used the light." Ethan hurled the radio against the wall. It shattered, the voice cutting off mid-word. He slumped to the floor, covering his ears, but even then the words echoed in his skull. When he finally looked up, the fire had died completely. The only illumination came from the moonlight leaking through the cracks in the boards, a silvery glow that pooled across the floor in long, trembling shapes. He stared at one of them. It wasn't a shadow. It was a footprint, bare, human, pressed into the snow that had blown in from the broken window. Then another appeared beside it. And another. They stopped halfway across the room, leading toward the table that covered the trapdoor. The table shifted. Just a tremor at first. Then again, harder. Ethan backed away, raising the rifle. His mind was a blur of noise, adrenaline, disbelief. The table rocked once more, then fell still. He waited, chest heaving. Nothing. And then, a whisper. Not from the trapdoor this time, but from the wall itself, so faint he almost missed it. "Robert." He squeezed his eyes shut. "Go away. You opened the door." The voice was closer now. Behind him. Inside the walls. He couldn't tell. He swung the flashlight wildly, the beam caught the frost on the window. Words were forming again in the condensation, curling as if written by invisible fingers. "Come down." "No," Ethan gasped. "No, I." The lantern flared to life on its own, its light searing bright, washing the room in gold. For a second, Ethan thought it was exploding, but the flame inside wasn't normal. It twisted upward, forming the faint outline of a face. His father's face. Robert's voice emerged from the flame, distant, broken, almost a sob. "Don't answer him, Ethan. Not this time." Then the flame snuffed out, leaving only darkness and the echo of that voice. Ethan stood frozen in the silence that followed. Snow pressed against the walls, the storm howling like a living thing outside. Somewhere deep below, something began to move again, slow, heavy, dragging chains across stone. The rifle shook in his hands. He took a step toward the door, every muscle urging him to run. But before he could move, the sound came one last time from beneath the floorboards. 3 knocks. Not slow this time. Fast. Urgent. And after them, a single, rasping word. "Ethan." Section 3, What the Light Remembers. The storm raged through the night, and into the grey hours before dawn. Ethan didn't move from his spot by the door. The rifle lay across his knees, his eyes fixed on the trapdoor. No more knocks came, but the silence beneath the floor was worse than the noise had been. When the wind finally eased, the quiet that followed felt unnatural, too deep, too sudden, as though even the mountains were holding their breath. He had 2 choices: run into the storm, or face whatever waited below. He chose the latter. He pushed the table aside and knelt beside the hatch. Frost had formed around the edges, the wood rimed with ice. His fingers trembled as he undid the latch. The hinges gave with a groan that echoed through the cabin like a sigh. The smell hit him first, cold stone and rot. He shone his flashlight down into the darkness. The tunnel yawned open below, the beam cutting through thick air that shimmered faintly, as if full of dust. Something glittered on the steps, droplets of black residue, still wet. He swallowed hard. "You're not real," he whispered. "You're not." But some part of him already knew that wasn't true. He climbed down. The air grew colder with each step, so cold it felt like knives against his lungs. The light from above shrank to nothing, replaced by the pale arc of his flashlight. The tunnel walls seemed narrower than before, the rock slick and wet. At the bottom, the door to the chamber stood open. The lantern he had dropped earlier still lay shattered on the floor, but the room wasn't dark. A faint glow pulsed from somewhere deeper inside, soft and rhythmic, casting long shadows that swayed across the stone. He moved forward, rifle raised. The glow came from the figure chained to the ceiling. The corpse was gone. Or rather, it was moving. It hung limp between the chains, twitching in slow, irregular motions. A pulse beneath the skin that glowed faintly with that same sickly light. Its head tilted back at an unnatural angle, the mouth opened and closed soundlessly, as though breathing through water. The face, half rotted, half frozen, was still recognizable. Robert Caldwell. Ethan's body locked. The rifle slipped from his hands and hit the stone with a hollow clang. "No," he took a step forward, then another. "No, you can't be." The eyes opened. They glowed the same pale color, as the light pulsing through the skin, the color of moonlight on ice. The body shuddered once, a slow exhale escaping the lungs like steam. Then a voice, dry and distant. "Ethan." He stumbled backward, crashing into the table. You're dead." The voice came again, broken, fading in and out like a bad signal. "Don't follow him. Don't open the door again." Ethan's hands trembled uncontrollably. He was crying and didn't even realize it. "Dad, what did you do?" Robert's head lifted slightly, the chains creaking with the motion. "Tried to stop him. Too late." The glow inside the body flared once, then dimmed. The smell of ozone filled the air, sharp, electric. From the shadows behind the table came the sound of metal dragging across stone. Ethan spun around. Something was crawling out of the tunnel beyond the chamber, a shape too large to be human, hunched, its limbs elongated by the dim light. It moved with slow, deliberate jerks, as though the world itself resisted its motion. When it reached the edge of the light, Ethan saw the face. Victor Lang. Or what was left of him. The skin was translucent, veins visible beneath like cracks in ice. His hair hung in wet strands, silver turned almost white. The mouth was slack, but when it opened, a low hum filled the room, not sound, but vibration, resonating through the walls. Robert's body convulsed violently, the chains rattling. Ethan grabbed the rifle, raised it with shaking hands. "Stay back." The creature's head tilted, eyes reflecting the beam like glass. Then, slowly, impossibly, it smiled. "He still thinks I'm human," it said, the voice layered, one tone Victor's, another something deeper, older. Ethan fired. The shot tore through the air, echoing like thunder. The creature staggered but didn't fall. It straightened, black fluid dripping from the wound, and took another step forward. Behind it, Robert's body jerked again, chains snapping one by one. "Run," he rasped. "Run now." Ethan turned and sprinted for the stairs. He could hear the creature behind him, its movements scraping, shuffling, impossibly fast. The tunnel walls pulsed with light as he ran, the glow chasing him upward like breath. He reached the ladder and climbed, boots slipping on the wet rungs. Something grabbed his ankle. He kicked hard, connecting with bone and cold flesh. The grip loosened. He threw himself upward, bursting through the hatch, slamming it shut and locking it just as something hit the underside with tremendous force. The floorboards bowed under the impact. He stumbled back, gasping. The sound came again, another hit, then another, wood splintering. The rifle was empty. He grabbed the lantern, the nearest object, ready to swing it like a weapon. Then the noise stopped. Total silence. He waited, chest heaving. The wind outside had died completely. Even the snow seemed to hold still. For a long time, nothing moved. Then, slowly, a shadow fell across the window, long, thin, head tilted in that same, impossible angle. Victor stood outside, motionless, his form haloed by the pale glow of the moon. His eyes burned faintly through the glass, 2 points of light. Ethan froze. He didn't dare breathe. Victor raised a hand and placed it against the window pane. Frost bloomed outward from the contact, spiderwebbing across the glass. Then, softly, the voice came again, not through the window, not through the air, but inside Ethan's head. You opened the door. Now it's your turn to keep it closed. The image wavered, the outline flickering as the clouds moved across the moon. For an instant, Victor's reflection in the glass changed, replaced by something else. A vast, faceless shape stretching across the forest, like the mountain itself had come alive. Then the light dimmed. The shadow vanished. Ethan dropped the lantern, breathing hard. His pulse pounded in his ears. The house creaked softly, settling. He turned back toward the desk, and froze. The journal was open again, though he hadn't touched it. A new page lay revealed, the ink still wet. He is not the curse. The light is. The light remembers us. It keeps what it touches. The words blurred in his vision. He stepped backward, shaking his head. No. No, I'm done. He grabbed his coat and pack, stuffing the journal inside. He didn't care what answers lay buried here anymore, only that he left before whatever his father had unleashed remembered him too. He opened the door. The night outside was so clear it hurt to look at. The storm had vanished, leaving only stillness and the cold glow of the full moon on the snow. Every sound carried, the crunch of his boots, the whisper of the wind through the trees. He didn't look back at the cabin. But halfway down the path, he heard it, faint, behind him, almost gentle. A single, hollow chime. Like a bell. The same sound he'd heard on the ridge. He turned. The cabin's windows glowed faintly from within, though no fire burned inside. And for a heartbeat, just one, he saw a figure standing in the doorway, tall, thin, silver-haired. Watching. Then the light went out. Ethan walked until dawn, until the forest gave way to open snowfields and the distant outline of Zermatt's valley. When he finally reached the first road, the world seemed normal again, cars, tracks, signs of life. He looked back once, toward the mountains. The peaks were swallowed in cloud. Nothing moved. No sound. And yet, in the glass of the bus shelter beside him, his reflection flickered, just for a second. Two shapes stood there instead of one. Part 3: The Hollow Peak. Section 1: The Descent. The mountains were silent when Ethan left them. By the time he reached the outskirts of Zermatt, dawn had thinned the sky to a brittle gray, and the snow had turned to slush beneath his boots. The cold still clung to him like a second skin, but the air was different here, softer, warmer, human. For the first time in days, he saw color. A red train car parked beside the station, a yellow sign creaking in the wind, the dark green of pine needles pressing through the melt. It felt unreal, like walking through a photograph. He should have felt relief. Instead, the quiet unsettled him more than the storm ever had. Every time he blinked, he saw flashes of the cabin, the marks on the door, the symbols in frost, the glow inside his father's corpse. He told himself it was trauma, exhaustion, hypothermia. But somewhere beneath the reasoning was another thought he refused to finish. What if I didn't come back alone? The police station sat on the edge of town, a modest concrete building with fogged windows. Inside, the air smelled of paper, coffee, and radiator heat. A young officer in a heavy sweater looked up from his desk as Ethan entered. "Can I help you?" he asked in careful English. Ethan nodded, still catching his breath. "My name's Caldwell. Ethan Caldwell. My father, Robert Caldwell, died here last winter. I found his cabin. I need to report." He trailed off. What exactly was he reporting? That his father's corpse was chained to the ceiling. That a man long thought dead had spoken to him through the radio. The officer frowned gently. "You are okay, sir? You look," he searched for the word, "tired." Ethan swallowed. "I just need to speak to someone about my father's property. There's something down there that shouldn't be." The officer typed the name into his computer, then nodded. "Robert Caldwell." "Yes, the Englishman. The mountain accident, December 2010. He glanced up. His body was recovered near Schwarzgrat Ridge. Very bad weather that day. Ethan's skin went cold. "Recovered?" "Yes," the man said slowly. "Brought down by a rescue team." "You did not know?" Ethan shook his head. "That's impossible." He stopped himself. "Where is it now?" The officer checked the record. "Cremated, by order of the canton. His effects were collected by your family's lawyer." Ethan stared at him. "That can't be right." The man offered an uneasy smile. "It has been over a year, sir." Ethan stepped back, dizziness flooding him. If the police had found and cremated Robert's body, then who, or what, had he seen hanging in the cellar? He muttered a thank you, and left before the officer could ask questions. Outside, the wind had picked up again, sweeping loose snow across the street. He walked aimlessly through the town center, past cafes just opening for breakfast, past the distant clang of church bells. He felt weightless, detached, as though his body was moving on reflex while his mind remained trapped in the mountain. When he passed a storefront window, he caught his reflection. For a moment, he didn't recognize it, the gaunt face, the hollow eyes, the layer of mountain grime. But something else made him freeze. There was a second shape behind him in the reflection. Faint. Tall. Just over his shoulder. He spun around. The street was empty. He stared at the glass again. Only his own reflection remained. A voice behind him broke the silence. "You are Mr. Caldwell." Ethan turned. An older man in a wool coat stood by the corner, lean, grey-bearded, with the calm authority of someone who had waited a long time. "I'm Dr. Weiss," he said. "Your father's associate. I saw your name at the station." Ethan's chest tightened. "You knew him?" Weiss nodded. "I did. We worked together, years ago." His eyes flicked briefly toward the mountain peaks in the distance. "I warned him not to go back there." "Then you know about Victor," Ethan said quickly. Weiss's expression barely changed, but his hands clenched in his pockets. "Walk with me." They crossed the bridge over the frozen river, boots crunching in the snow. The town grew quieter as they moved away from the center. "I thought the project was dead," Weiss said at last. "When the government shut it down, the others scattered. But your father, he couldn't let go. He believed Victor survived." "He did," Ethan said. "I saw him." Weiss gave him a long, searching look. "You're sure?" Ethan hesitated. He wasn't human anymore. The older man sighed through his nose, a sound halfway between pity and understanding. "No. He wouldn't be." The exposure changed him. Light and decay are not meant to coexist in one vessel. They stopped beside a frozen pond. Weiss turned to face him. "There was something your father never told you. Project Lumen wasn't just about prolonging life. It was about memory. About trapping a consciousness in light. Ethan stared. What do you mean? Weiss gestured vaguely toward the sky. When we began, we believed that moonlight, reflected sunlight, carried enough spectral variance to affect biological tissue. Victor thought we could encode human awareness in that reflection. A kind of preservation. And it worked, Ethan said bitterly. Just not the way you expected. Weiss looked away. The first time Victor was exposed, he disappeared for 3 nights. When he returned, he spoke as if the light itself was inside him, as if he could feel every shadow move. Your father believed he had opened a door to something older than science. Ethan shivered. The door in the cabin. Weiss nodded once. It wasn't meant to be opened twice. They stood in silence for a moment, wind hissing through the trees. Weiss's breath misted white in the air. What happens now? Ethan asked. Weiss looked at him carefully. If you left that place intact, it will call to him again. To both of you. Then we destroy it. The doctor smiled faintly, a sad, knowing smile. You can't destroy light, Mr. Caldwell. You can only stop reflecting it. That night, Ethan took a room at a small inn near the train station. The room was warm, the bed clean, the kind of ordinary comfort he hadn't felt in weeks. Yet he couldn't sleep. Every sound made him flinch, the groan of the pipes, the click of the radiator. He kept the curtains drawn tight, but pale silver leaked through the edges, moonlight spilling across the floorboards like water. He turned his father's notebook over in his hands, the last page still open to the words. The light remembers us. He thought of the reflection in the glass, the second shape that shouldn't have been there. He told himself it was exhaustion. But a small, traitorous part of him wondered if the reflection had been the true image, and he, the ghost. Somewhere outside, a bell tolled midnight. Then, faint, impossible, the radio on the nightstand crackled to life. Ethan froze. He hadn't touched it. Static whispered through the dark. Then, beneath it, a voice he recognized. Ethan. He shut his eyes. No. You can't hide from the light. He yanked the plug from the wall. The static stopped instantly. Silence rushed in. He waited, heartbeat thudding in his throat. Slowly, he turned toward the window. The curtain fabric glowed faintly, silver shifting beneath it. He approached, hand trembling, and pulled the curtain aside. Outside, across the street, stood a figure. Still. Barefoot. Hair pale as frost. The street light flickered once. When it came back, the figure was gone. Ethan let the curtain fall and backed away until his shoulders hit the wall. He didn't sleep that night. When dawn came, he was still sitting by the window, eyes wide, the first train ticket to Geneva clutched in his hand. Section 2, The Reflection. The next morning broke clear and colorless. A thin mist hung over Zermatt like smoke, softening the edges of rooftops and mountains alike. The storm was gone, but the air felt heavier for it, the strange, muffled calm that follows catastrophe. Ethan left the inn before sunrise, the last page of his father's notebook tucked safely in his coat. He didn't look back at the window where he'd sat all night, watching the street. The station lay downhill, the cobblestones slick with meltwater, the smell of diesel and pine cutting through the cold. The ticket to Geneva trembled in his glove. He told himself it would be simple, train to the city, then a flight to London, and by this time tomorrow, he'd be home. The Alps would shrink to rumor and memory. When he reached the platform, the loudspeaker droned a delay notice in 3 languages. He sat on a bench beneath the overhang, trying to steady his hands. The morning light poured through the mist, pale and silvery, catching in every puddle. He caught his reflection in one of them. For an instant, it blinked out of sync. He rubbed his eyes. Sleep deprivation. That's all. A child's laughter carried from somewhere down the platform. Ethan turned, but the station was nearly empty. Only a few locals waiting with their luggage, faces turned away. The laughter came again, closer now, echoing oddly as if from the wrong direction. Then the sound folded into static. He froze. The noise was coming from the loudspeaker above him, a soft, crackling whisper threading through the announcements. A man's voice, low and stretched thin by interference. You can't run from what remembers you. Ethan stood so fast his bag fell over. The voice vanished, the loudspeaker resumed its normal loop, cheerful and oblivious. He looked around, heart hammering. Nobody else reacted. The world went on as though nothing had happened. He forced himself to breathe, to think. He'd left the radio behind at the inn. Whatever this was, it was in his head, echoes of stress, of sleepless nights. He repeated that to himself until the train arrived, its brakes screaming against the rails. He boarded. The carriage was nearly empty. Snow streaked the windows as the train began its slow descent through the valley. The Alps receded behind him, white and endless, the peaks cutting into the pale sky. Ethan watched them until they blurred, until the reflection of his own face overtook the view. Something about it felt wrong. The reflection was too still. He shifted in his seat, the image didn't. His breath fogged the glass, but the reflected figure did not breathe. He jerked his head away, eyes shut tight. You're imagining it. You're overtired. Keep moving. He stared down at the notebook instead, forcing his attention to the ink stains, the fragments of his father's handwriting. The light carries the pattern of a soul. Once it has touched you, it keeps a copy. VL is no longer one man. He is a reflection that found a way to stand alone. The words blurred as the train lurched around a curve. Ethan pressed the notebook shut. Outside, the sun broke briefly through the clouds, a blinding shimmer that washed over the windows. The lights in the carriage flickered. For a heartbeat, every reflection along the glass shifted, all the passengers turning their heads in unison to stare directly at him. Then the lights steadied. The reflections resumed their ordinary mimicry. Ethan sat frozen, mouth dry. The woman across the aisle scrolled through her phone, oblivious. A child yawned. No one else had seen it. He pressed his hand to the window. The glass was cold, but beneath the surface, a faint warmth pulsed back, rhythmic, matching his heartbeat. He yanked his hand away. The train reached Visp by mid-morning. Ethan switched lines, craving crowds, noise, movement. Anything but silence. Geneva was 5 hours away. He sat near the back this time, facing the aisle. The conductor came by, an older man with kind eyes and a clipped Swiss accent. He punched the ticket, nodded politely, and moved on. When Ethan looked up, the man was standing at the far end of the car, staring through the window at the reflection instead of the view. His lips moved faintly, as though whispering. Ethan couldn't hear what he said, but the rhythm was familiar. 3 syllables. The same cadence as the knock beneath the floor. Robert. The conductor blinked, seemed to shake himself, and continued down the car, as though nothing had happened. Ethan's chest tightened. The air smelled faintly of ozone, sharp, electrical. He could almost feel it on his skin, a hum beneath the surface, the same vibration that had filled the tunnel below the cabin. He tried to focus on the landscape, tunnels, bridges, flashes of green valleys, but each time the train passed through shadow, the glass turned mirror dark, and the reflection beside him seemed a half-second late, lagging like a corrupted film. He turned the page of the notebook again. At the bottom of the final entry, written in his father's smaller hand, was something he hadn't noticed before, almost invisible, pressed into the paper. If the reflection moves first, don't look away. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. He turned toward the window. In the glass, his reflection was staring back, but its head was already turned, facing him directly, eyes pale and wide. His own face remained motionless. The glass rippled. Then, with a faint, sharp sound, a crack split across the pane, spreading like frost. The lights in the carriage flickered again, passengers murmuring in confusion. The reflection smiled. Ethan stumbled out of his seat, nearly tripping over his bag. The conductor shouted something in German, but the words drowned under the screech of brakes as the train slowed into a tunnel. For a heartbeat, total darkness swallowed everything. When light returned, the crack in the window was gone. So was his reflection. He reached Geneva by late afternoon, hollow-eyed and trembling. The crowds in the station moved around him in a blow of color and sound, so many faces, so much light, and yet he felt utterly alone. He made his way to a payphone near the exit, and dialed his mother's number in London. It rang once. Twice. Then, instead of Helen's voice, the line filled with static. And under it, faint and distant. Ethan. He hung up so hard the receiver cracked. People glanced at him, he muttered an apology and fled toward the terminal. Outside, the sun hung low over Lake Geneva, its reflection trembling across the water. The air was almost warm now. He sat on a bench facing the lake, trying to breathe. The city noise helped, traffic, voices, life. Reality. He took out the notebook one last time, staring at the cover. He wanted to throw it into the water, to be free of it, of all of it. But when he turned it over in his hands, he realized something had changed. The cover was warm. He opened it. A new sentence had appeared on the last page, written in his father's hand, though the ink was still wet, though Robert Caldwell had been dead for more than a year. The light remembers, and it travels. Ethan looked up. The lake surface shimmered with the reflection of the sun, too bright to look at directly. For an instant, he saw a silhouette walking across that brightness, long-limbed, silver-haired, moving soundlessly toward the shore. He blinked, and it was gone. But when he glanced down at the water's edge, the ripples distorted his own reflection, stretching it, twisting it, until it no longer looked like him at all. He stood quickly, heart pounding. The notebook slipped from his hand and landed on the pavement, pages fluttering in the breeze. The last line stared up at him. He waits for nightfall. That evening, Ethan boarded his flight home. From his seat by the window, the Alps were visible one last time, vast and ghostly under the setting sun. As the plane climbed, the peaks faded into cloud. He closed his eyes. For the first time in days, he felt the pull of exhaustion winning. The hum of the engines became a lullaby, steady, distant. But as he drifted toward sleep, a faint reflection shimmered on the window, not of his face, but of another's. A shape outlined in moonlight, smiling faintly back at him. The clouds parted below, silver with reflected light. And in that light, something moved. Section 3, The Light That Remains. London was grey when Ethan returned. The city felt smaller than he remembered, pressed beneath low clouds and constant drizzle. He stepped out of Heathrow with a single bag and no luggage tag, the notebook sealed in a plastic folder inside his coat. For the first time in weeks, the air carried no scent of snow or pine, only exhaust, wet pavement, and life. People moved in steady rivers around him, talking, laughing, staring into phones. He tried to let the noise anchor him. Civilization, he told himself. Normal. But every reflective surface, a puddle, a bus window, a car mirror, drew his eyes. Each time, his reflection lagged by a breath. Helen Caldwell's flat in South Kensington looked exactly as it had the day he'd left, plants by the window, the clock ticking too loud in the kitchen. She opened the door wearing her reading glasses and a look of exhausted disbelief. Ethan. She pulled him into a brief, tight hug. Good Lord, you're freezing. Come in. The heat hit him like a wave. He hadn't realized how long it had been since he'd felt warmth that wasn't firelight. He followed her to the kitchen, where tea steamed on the counter. "I saw the news," she said. "Avalanches near Zermatt. I thought." Her voice faltered. "What happened up there?" He hesitated. The truth hung on his tongue like a stone. "I found the cabin," he said at last. "And what father was working on." Her expression hardened. "I told you not to dig into that madness." "It wasn't madness," he said quietly. "Not exactly." She stared at him, the same wary look she used when he was a child trying to justify a lie. "You sound just like him." "Maybe he wasn't wrong," Ethan said. "He wasn't just chasing phantoms. There was something real, something dangerous." Helen's face went pale. "Don't you start believing his stories." "I don't have to believe them." He looked down at his hands. "I saw them." For a long time, neither spoke. The kettle clicked softly as it cooled. Finally, she said, "Whatever you think you saw, you're home now. You're safe." She reached out to touch his arm, and froze. The light from the window hit his skin at an angle, just enough for her to see the faint shimmer beneath it, the pulse of something luminescent, like veins of light tracing under the flesh. She drew back sharply. "Ethan, what is that?" He stared at his hands. The glow was faint, but undeniable, a whisper of silver moving just beneath the skin, the same color that had filled the cabin, the same rhythm that had beat through his father's corpse. He covered his hands quickly. "It's nothing." That night, he couldn't sleep. The city's noise, cars, sirens, footsteps, all felt distant, like he was hearing them underwater. He sat by the window, watching rain streak the glass. In the reflection, the room behind him was empty. He stood and turned. The room was exactly as it should be, his mother asleep down the hall, the faint glow of the streetlight on the wallpaper. He turned back toward the glass. The reflection was still empty. He pressed his palm against the pane. Cold. Wet. Real. And then, faintly, a whisper from the other side. "Ethan." He stumbled backward. The voice wasn't Robert's. It wasn't Victor's either. It was his own, slower, lower, echoing. "It's time." The reflection stepped into place, slowly, as though surfacing from deep water. But it wasn't mimicking him anymore. It looked older. Its eyes glowed faintly silver, and when it smiled, the expression was gentle, almost sad. "You opened the door," it said softly. "Now close it." The glass shimmered, ripples spreading outward. For an instant, he saw the Alps reflected there, the cabin, the circle of stones, the endless snow. "Who are you?" he whispered. "What your father tried to save." The window pane rippled again. Light spilled into the room, moonlight, but alive, pulsing like breath. In its glow, he saw images flicker. Robert standing in the lab, Victor laughing beside him, the failed experiment, the storm, the chains. The light was memory, all of it, trapped, replaying endlessly. He realized then what his father had meant. The light remembers us. And now it remembered him. The reflection extended a hand. "Come back. Finish it." Ethan shook his head. "No. It ends here." He turned toward the hallway, but the door was gone. The walls had become white and endless, like snow under a full moon. The apartment dissolved around him, leaving only the window and the reflection still waiting within it. "It won't end," the reflection said. "Unless one of us stops looking." Ethan stared into his own eyes. "Then I'll stop." He closed his eyes and slammed his fist into the glass. Light exploded outward, a flash so bright it burned through thought, through sound, through everything. For a moment, he was nowhere, suspended in silence and cold. When he opened his eyes again, He was standing in the circle of stones on the ridge above Zermatt. The snow was falling gently. The cabin stood dark in the valley below. Across from him stood the reflection, but it was no longer glowing. It was only a man now, his own face pale, human. Ethan understood then. The circle, the symbols, the door, all of it was meant to balance what the light had taken. To return it to shadow. He reached into his coat and pulled out the notebook. The final page fluttered open in the wind. If I fail, close the door. Let the light forget. He set the notebook in the snow and struck a match. The flame caught quickly, pages curling black, ash scattering into the wind. The silver in his skin dimmed, flickered, and finally went dark. Across the circle, the reflection smiled, not hauntingly this time, but in peace. He's waiting, it said, voice faint now. You did what he couldn't. The wind rose, carrying snow between them. When it cleared, the reflection was gone. Ethan stood alone. By morning, the storm had passed. A rescue patrol found a man on the ridge near Schwarzgrat, unconscious but alive. They carried him down to town, wrapped in blankets, muttering about how he'd been found standing in the open, eyes fixed on the sunrise. When asked his name, he paused for a long time before answering. Ethan Caldwell, he said quietly. And it's finished. Weeks later, back in London, Helen received a small parcel with no return address. Inside was a photograph, old, taken in the Alps, showing Robert Caldwell smiling beside a younger man with silver hair. On the back, written in her husband's familiar hand. The light forgets, at last. She placed the photo by the window, where the grey morning light could touch it. For a moment, it seemed to glow, then faded. That night, as Ethan sat beside the Thames watching the city lights ripple across the water, he finally saw only his own reflection. No delay. No shimmer. Just himself. He let the notebook's charred remains fall into the river. The pages sank quietly, the current carrying them away beneath the bridge. Above him, the moon rose pale and perfect. And for the first time, it didn't look back.